fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney, alongside Nick Zararis. I'm back at the usual spot, at the usual outpost. Also, for those that are wondering where the Twitter feed is, well, the Lord General Mastermind over there has made it premium only, and we are not going to pay him any money. So
if the website starts working, maybe we could have a conversation.
Maybe.
But the website barely works, so that's the thing. Like, it's one thing to take the principled stance of I'm not going to give him money. It's another thing to be like, give me money for something that barely works,
yes.
which is the other component of this. But we got a little bit of Rangers news. They locked up a 7th D and brought back Ruhwedel, and they gave Schneider a 2-year deal. We've got that to talk about. We've got some salary stuff to talk about, and then we sit in this holding pattern where I feel like I don't know anybody who's happy. There are plenty of people who are like,
sure,
I would say agnostic, where it's not the end of the world, the decisions they've made. But you went from 2 weeks ago, we're getting rid of probably the most impactfully worst player on the team who makes an outsized amount of money, to he's going to stay. And we're going to all have to pretend it didn't happen, because that's what is effectively going to happen. You know, I really doubt that based on the fact it's been absolute radio silence on that front, he's not getting bought out. I know that window is technically open because Lindgren filed for arbitration, but I am operating under the assumption he is coming back. I am operating under the assumption, like we talked about last week, that there will be the redemption narrative centered around him to start next season of he had a difficult offseason. He wasn't sure if he was going to be here or not, but he stuck to his contractually obligated guns, and he's very excited to prove everybody wrong. That is going to be the official narrative, that he's here to prove everyone wrong. The problem
we're
is
gonna get the puff pieces from that in like the middle of October, or like during training camp of from the ashes of nobody wants me to now he's back as the leader of this team. We're gonna get stories like that. And
the problem is you got to play eventually, and there's no reason. The thing is, this isn't like Lindgren, where like you could maybe convince me that a lot of the issues last year were systemic, like style based, of going from one set of responsibilities to another. Lindgren's only 26. I think there's reason to believe he's not totally washed. Trouba's only getting older and only accumulating more miles. He's gotten slower every year since he's been in New York. He's gotten worse defensively every year since he's gotten to New York. So I'm inclined to believe that physical fall off and systemic demands are why Trouba's struggling. Whereas Lindgren, I think there's a chance it's not just a physical fall off. I do think in his case, it's a little bit more of a style thing and what the team is asking him to do. Eventually he has to play. And that's the issue here. Nobody has a problem with Jacob Trouba, the person. Nobody has a problem.
We've said this every time we've talked about him. Like we don't have an issue with him as a human being.
That's the thing, because that's where you get people in these arguments, because they are arguing the person, not the point, because they know they're wrong. That's the thing. The team can't come out and say, well, he sucks, but we can't get rid of him. They need to massage this situation, and everybody knows they have means of going about doing that, trying to massage, smooth out this situation, and that's what we're going to watch happen. Now, it won't happen in July. It probably won't happen the first 3 weeks of August, because the national hockey media is all on vacation, and the teams are doing all the reporting at this point in the summer. There will be no breaking news. Oh, Rangers are getting close to an agreement with, as you saw with the Schneider agreement, which for some reason came on a Saturday afternoon, which I don't know what Schneider's agent is doing work on a Saturday afternoon.
In July.
Or the Rangers for that matter. Maybe it's a Rangers thing, not a Schneider thing. So let's start there. We'll start with Schneider because this is the most news thing, and we actually have something to talk about. This is a very straightforward, simple card. All that's on here is time on ice, points, and block shots. The argument for believing Schneider still has more to give is that he played with about as awful a partner as you possibly could his first 2 seasons in the NHL. This is last year and the year before, and doesn't include his first season, but he's got a lot of games played. He's still very young. To have over 200 games played as a 23-year-old, as a defenseman, that's something that makes you, perk your eye up. And some of that is the fact that, the Rangers gave him a lot more opportunity than they've given other young defensemen at various points in their cycle, or young forwards for that matter. The Rangers had real stock invested in this guy. They traded up to get him because the conjecture was the Devils were going to take him at 20. So they leapfrogged him. They went up to 19. We all know the video of JD fist pumping how excited they were they got him. I still don't know what Braden Schneider is. That's fine. He's only 23 years old. I wrote about him in season, and the argument has always been the skating and the skating ability alone got him in the door. He's not a bad skater. He's not a great skater, but he's a good skater for his size. The issue is the puck skill. Whether it's moving the puck, recovering the puck, playing the puck, that's the issue here. And I remember we had a conversation during the season about where the disconnect is, because when he gets the puck and he skates it, he's not terrible with it. In the offensive zone, he's not terrible. But when it comes time to make one pass in the defensive zone or to win a loose puck, he cannot do it for whatever reason. His puck skills in the defensive zone, in terms of transitioning from defense to offense, are not good enough. And some of that you can chalk up to partner issues. Playing with Ben Harper, playing with Libor Hayek, playing with Patrick Nemeth. Those are reasonable excuses. It would be hard for any defenseman, especially a young guy still developing, to know what he is.
Sure.
To know who he's playing with. Last year, though, he got run with Gus. He got run with K'Andre Miller. And the results, underlying wise, still not particularly impressive. And some of that is team. The Rangers are never going to have great underlying numbers because of the way they play. But if Schneider is supposed to be this player the Rangers think he is, I don't want to say this is it because this is a 2-year contract, but this is his window. Either he proves he's a top 4 guy, and that next contract is, 6 years, $7.5 million per year, or they try and find a way to move him in a year and a half because he's not what they need him to be. And based on the way the Rangers have handled him up until this point, I believe they're going to give him every single opportunity to prove he's, a 3 or a 4 when he might just be a 5. And there's nothing wrong with him being a 5, but that means you do need to find a 3 or a 4.
Well, the problem all comes back to number 8, where if he was truly the team's 3rd or 4th best defenseman, or maybe even the 2nd, if you want to push Lindgren down, if he was truly the top defenseman the Rangers thought they were getting from Winnipeg, this wouldn't be a conversation point, because then Schneider would have moved down to the bottom pair. It would be Jones and Schneider now this season, and they could have at it. But because Trouba has been so bad, and even Peter Laviolette, after 3 entire head coaches, has finally figured out that Miller Trouba don't work together and they have to break them up, even though he went back to that pair in the playoffs. Trouba is not a top 2 defenseman. He's not a top 4 defenseman, which makes Schneider's work even harder than it is, because when he was a rookie in the NHL, he was paired with just trash can teammates, partners on the blue line. Ben Harper, a little bit later on, just not an NHL defenseman, just not good for Schneider's development. And even this season with Erik Gustafsson, who was way better than anybody he's played with before for the most part, he was still a Jekyll and Hyde player, where a lot of times you didn't know what kind of which version of Erik Gustafsson you would get game in and game out, shift in and shift out a lot of times as well. And that's not good for his development either. So a lot of this comes down to the Rangers not being able to figure out a partner for Schneider that will actually help him in his development, for one. And two, this comes down to they're paying their captain a lot of money to play hockey badly, and that is really hurting ultimately Schneider's development.
I'm going to build off of that thought. So one of the real issues they have with Schneider, and here, I'll pull this up because I can actually back up what I want to say here. One of the things with Schneider, you were talking about it right there, that based on the partners he's played with, you got to taper your expectations to some degree. Like we were saying, it would have been hard for anybody to be successful with Patrick Nemeth, to be successful with Ben Harper. And I think part of the reason a lot of Ranger fans, I don't want to say turned on, but grew tired of Erik Gustafsson is that Gustafsson's limitations were very glaring. It wasn't that they were decision things, it's that he was physically incapable of doing certain things. He couldn't really win loose pucks. He couldn't battle in front of the net. He could recover the puck and break it out, but beyond that, you weren't getting a whole lot. Where is it? I need the forwards and defensemen, and I will share the screen.
Yeah, well, also the problem with Gustafsson is just like I said, like I said a second ago, where he would have moments of brilliance, and then he would have moments of like, who is this guy off the street the Rangers got to play hockey? He's a very strange hockey player from that perspective, and I always wonder how a player like that can have an extended career in the NHL. Because like the skills are there. Obviously the skills are there, because if you didn't have the skills, you wouldn't have shining moments occasionally. Like they wouldn't appear at all. But at the same time, like, bro, how are you, like, that stretch in November when Adam Fox went down for a few weeks and it was the Gus show? He was outstanding. My man's was defending well. He was really the leader with the puck on the blue line. He was doing everything. And then once Adam Fox came back, it was like 1 second he's really good. The next he's like, I feel like my grandmother could play better. What's going on? Like, where is the consistency? And that also doesn't help somebody like Schneider, who is young and still trying to figure out the minutia of his game on a nightly basis.
I will push back ever so slightly on that with as far as Gustafsson, because he was good at what he was asked to do. The problem became when you asked him to do more than that. And that's the thing with these specialist type players who are good at one thing. If you ask them to do anything other than that, they are going to have a hard time. So I will agree. I will partially disagree. The thing I wanted to pull up here and build off of your point, it's not only that he's playing with Gustafsson, he's playing with Ben Harper, he's playing with Patrick Nemeth. It's that when he's out there, he's also playing with lower quality forwards as well. You look at Schneider's minutes, Panarin and Trocheck, those are blue, less ice time. Zibanejad, Kreider, blue, less ice time. So we're talking Cooley, Kakko, Brodzinski, Bonino, Roslovic, Wenberg. We are not talking about him getting considerable ice time with play drivers. And when you're a defenseman whom probably isn't the best puck mover, and you are playing with forwards who are not going to be able to really contribute to helping you in transition, it puts a lot more burden on him and on Gustafsson to be able to go from defense to offense cleanly. Because somebody like Cooley or Vesey or Brodzinski, etc., they're not going to be able to receive the one breakout pass, get out of trouble, and then keep going to the next zone. Instead, you get a lot of the alley-oops, you get the rims along the boards, and that's why the third and fourth line at points, more so the fourth line, I'll give the credit where it's due. The third line wasn't as bad about this, but the fourth line, pinned in their own zone, can't win a loose puck. They're out there with Schneider, with Gustafsson, with Trouba, with Miller. They can't recover the puck, so they can't get it to the forwards. Because the forwards can't skate it out of danger, that puts more pressure on the defenseman to make that first pass perfectly. Because these aren't the most skilled players, there's a reason they're on the third or second pair, it creates kind of a trickle-down effect where because the defense can't win loose pucks, it puts more pressure on the forwards to contribute defensively. Because they're contributing more defensively, they're not in as good a position to be able to transition from defense to offense. It's all interconnected. And when you think about it one-dimensionally in terms of, oh, this guy messed up or that guy messed up, it's doing a slight disservice because it's not. Because the game state is so fluid that if you only chalk it up to, oh, well, Gustafsson did this, well, Gustafsson did this because of what was in front of him, or Schneider did this because of what's in front of him. And that's been the real problem for the Rangers the last few seasons. And it was something that in stretches this year, they were good about, playing team hockey where everybody's in the frame, pass, defense to offense, neutral zone, offensive zone, playing with a real synchronicity. Yeah, synchronicity. Yes. Yeah, words are hard sometimes. Synchronicity that they hadn't. You think about the team 2 years ago, the last year under Gallant, it was fire wagon hockey. It was long stretch passes, trying to play defense as little as possible without really having that neutral zone play you needed for a commensurate level of success offensively. And last year when the Rangers were at their best, they were playing as little defense as possible, going from defense to offense quickly. And as the season went along, the older habits started to kick in. They went in that rough spell, January, February. then they got going. They went on that, I think it was 14-game winning streak, 13-game winning streak at one point from the end of February into March, and they really got going. And it was good for a while there. And then they met one team that was able to outwork them. And that's kind of the conundrum with someone like Schneider. And I understand the Rangers being bullish. Like I said, 206 at regular season games. That doesn't include 3 playoff runs. 206 regular season games at 23 years old. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Like at some point, I'm going to have to go and look where that is in that draft class, because that's got to be in the upper echelon, especially amongst defensemen.
Sure.
And that's the reason that's the reason for optimism. I'm not prepared to say one thing or another, but the puck skills need to improve if you want to seriously consider him for the role that the Rangers probably think he's ready for.
That, and if you want the pairing to be K'Andre Miller and Braden Schneider, you at that point have to let the leash loose a little bit, because then at that point you have to understand that both of them are capable of moving the puck with it on their stick. They're not terrified of the puck like someone that is, let's say, Ryan Lindgren, somebody that just doesn't know what to do with the puck when they have it. Schneider knows what to do, especially in the offensive zone, is capable of making that pass or making that play. He doesn't do it with the consistency that we would like, and hopefully within the next year or so, we'll see a little bit more of that. K'Andre Miller also has the ability. We've seen the dynamic plays every now and again where he just takes the puck and he says, "Get out of my way, I'm going to score," and then he does it. Like he has that ability. So both of these guys possess some puck control qualities. Now it's a matter of letting them go, especially if you're Laviolette looking at Braden Schneider, where he's 23 years old, and if Braden Schneider wants to develop into a better puck mover, somebody that is more confident with the puck, either on their stick or about to be on his stick, then you have to let him go a little bit. You have to concede, okay, well, if you want him to get better offensively, well, there's only so many ways you can do that in a game. If you want him to be better offensively, then he has to take more risks.
I don't need him to be better offensively. I need him to be better at the puck is here. I got it. I need to move it. That's the issue. What he does in the offensive zone, if he gives you 25 points, that's great. The points aren't what matters for a guy like him. It's you don't want him falling into the problems that Trouba has, where under the hood, everybody can recognize the issues. But the casual hockey fan and the national hockey media guy says, "Oh, he's 7th in the league in hits and 3rd in the league in block shots.
Loves to hit people.
And he throws big hits in the neutral zone." That's what you don't want Schneider to become.
I don't think he will.
Oh, the Rangers were doing the baby Trouba thing 13 months into his NHL career.
I mean, but the thing about doing that kind of stuff is that's all great and good, but he hasn't replicated that style, which is good for Schneider.
Because he's still mobile. That's the thing.
But but for Schneider, that's the best possible outcome, is that you don't replicate this, I'm going to stand still and just chicken wing somebody because they're trying to skate by me mentality. Like he could still move his feet and he's doing a better job of that. Therefore, like, yeah, the Rangers could call him Baby Trouba, but he doesn't play that way, at least not right now.
No, his mobility is better, and that kind of protects him to some degree. He's also pretty good in the neutral zone as far as not getting skated around, whereas Trouba is one of the highest rates of being skated around in the entire league. So this brings us to a natural inflection point. They still got to take care of Lindgren, who, based on how long that contract is going to determine just how much it is. You know, there's a world where it's 2 by 3.5, 2 by 4, and it walks him to UFA. There's a world where it's 6 or 7 and it's about 4.5, 5, and the Rangers are paying a premium for what they think they can do with the guy as opposed to where he's probably actually trending. And the main reason I want to talk about this today is this is where we're at. This was the Rangers cap deployment allocation, whatever you want to call it, this past season, the year that just finished. You look at this chart. Panarin is 13.5, 13.8, Kreider 7%, Trouba's 9.5%, Fox is 11%, Zibanejad's 10%. Miller is going to at least double his money. I would not be surprised if he goes from 3.8 to 7. Yeah. Now, you also have the consideration the cap's going to go from 83, which is what this is, to 88, and then probably to 92. The next slide, where we talk about the salaries for Shesterkin, Miller, Lafrenière, it's based on $92 million. So when you talk about percent of cap, that's how you want to frame it, because the cap, in theory, is going to keep going up every single year. But looking at this pie chart, you get a clear picture where the Rangers have a majority of their money spent. It is in a handful of guys. It is in Trouba, Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, and Fox. Trocheck doesn't make a ton of money, but he makes a decent amount of money. And then Shesterkin. Shesterkin is obviously the big fish here, and that's why I'm going to go over to the next one. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. These are the three keys here to understanding where we are. This past season, Shesterkin was worth 6.8% of $83.5 million. This is based on $92 million, like I just said. If it's 11.5, that's 12.5 of the cap. If it's 12, 13. If it's 12.5, which I think is the absolute max he could get, it's 13.6. You're paying one guy almost 14% of the cap. That's going to change some things for you. You're going to have to make a lobotomizing decision somewhere on your roster. And if you pick Shesterkin, that's going to cost you somewhere else. Where? It depends. This could be a very different situation 6 months from now. If they win the Stanley Cup, it doesn't matter. They can it does not matter. They'll give Shesterkin the golden parachute.
Give him the key to the city.
Exactly. It doesn't matter.
Give him the whole cap. At that point, it doesn't matter. But the one thing that I want to talk about in relation to Ryan Lindgren is I would be okay with giving him a longer contract. I mean, as long as it's not like 7 or 8 years or whatever. But on the stipulation that the Rangers move him down in the lineup. I think if he was if he played on the second pairing, or I mean even on the third pairing, he'd be much more consistent than at least what we've seen from last year. Where last year he just, I mean, I get it, he was hurt a lot of the times and he just was struggling, but I feel like he'd be just much better suited for a not top 2 style of hockey.
This has been a Rangers issue for a while, though. They have consistently miscast guys. That's
you would think eventually, right? When you repeat the same class because you keep failing it, eventually you think, oh, maybe I should learn the material so I cannot fail the class. But to this point, they haven't opened the textbook, and that continues to worry me.
I agree with you, but I will say, based on everything we know about the Rangers organization, I am not inclined to believe that's going to happen, because in an ideal world, we would have gotten the Rob Luker experiment by now. We would have gotten Fox and Miller and Lindgren and Trouba, and we would have gotten a more accurate understanding of what Lindgren's ceiling is and what Miller's ceiling is, because ultimately, the reason you draft a guy like Miller, who doesn't have a lot of experience or production, is the traits. You drafted him because he's big and he's really fast. There's a reason on the thumbnail for this episode, I have an arrow up to Jay Bouwmeester. That's the high-end outcome of what K'Andre Miller could be. But he is not consistent enough defensively, and his offensive instincts aren't polished enough to be there yet. All of the tools are there. It ultimately comes down to environment and being able to capitalize on them. And as far as Lindgren, I don't think he's a building block piece. I think he is a supporting cast piece.
I agree.
And that's also been an issue for the Rangers at various points over the last 15 years or so, is that they view guys as invaluable for things that can't be quantified. And that's where we get into, I don't want to call it the crisis of expertise, but we get into this just trust me, bro mentality where somebody cannot articulate to me why the Rangers need Ryan Lindgren. They say he's gutsy, he's a warrior, he's got the skill set of a guy you need that time. What does he do hockey-wise that you are going to value that is going to help? And it comes down to a gatekeeping mindset of, well, you don't know what you're talking about. We've been doing it this way forever, and because of that, you have to trust us. But you look at the way Lindgren played, say, 2 years ago versus last year, and you see noticeable problems. You see a decline. You see maybe this guy is not cut out for where, A, the league is going and where our team is going.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to say, oh, we brought in a new system, he's going to learn it. If he doesn't have the skill set to play in that system, he's still not going to be effective, which I think is what this year will prove. It'll be the buy or sell on Lindgren based on the vision. And I'm not here to say Laviolette's going to be the coach indefinitely, but he's going to at least be the coach the next 2 years. And based on that, you're probably going to have to make a decision on, well, Does Lindgren fit what we want to do? And we can frame, do these guys fit what we want to do around these three? So we talked about this 2 weeks ago, and I'll repeat it now. If you don't want to pay Shesterkin top of the market, that's okay. But you are going to have to fundamentally reimagine this entire hockey team.
Yeah.
And it is a lot easier to move the other pieces around to accommodate him versus changing the entire team. It's not that I think you give him whatever he wants. It's that the Rangers don't really have a choice because they have made this entire team around him.
The Rangers' whole roster depends on them having an elite goaltender.
Yes.
That is the core DNA of the team, and it has been that way since Lundqvist took over in 2005. That has been the number one at the top of the list, the number one answer on the board in the Family Feud top 100 answers. Have an elite goalie, and then everything else is secondary. If Shesterkin comes to you and says, "Hey, I want $15 million," which he's not going to do, but let's just say for this argument that he will, and you have to then either move on from him or do whatever, and he's not on the team anymore. Okay, well, then the core number one answer of your team's construction is no longer in existence unless you find some magic beanstalk trade to make it happen. But then we're just getting into NHL 24 be a GM territories of silliness here. So the Rangers for the past 20 years have staked their entire roster on, okay, we have the best goalie in the league. We're going to fill out from that and see where it goes. So based off of that, there's no feasible way for me to see the Rangers have anybody be the starting goalie for this team besides Shesterkin. Now, again, he could go to Chris Drury and say, give me your firstborn child and also 45% of the cap, to which Drury will obviously say no to, and they'll have to figure it out. But I kind of don't think that's going to happen. So by all accounts, Shesterkin is going to be a Ranger for a long time. Obviously, it's a matter of how much he's going to get, on the dotted line. But if for some reason he says, I want $13 million, and Drury says, wait a minute, hold on now, and even if he does sign Shesterkin to that massive deal, well, you're going to have to cut somewhere. You're going to have to trim down the edges at some point because you can't sign everybody to these big deals, and that could be an issue.
The only conceivable way I could see them trading Shesterkin is if Drury gets fired and it's a different GM. That is the only way I could see it. And even then, I don't think you would take this job on the premise that you're going to rebuild the team. I think that's the only way you could justify making that type of move, because the alternative is a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get a great return on a goalie. I mean, some of it is the team's fault. The Flames could have gotten a lot more than fucking Kevin Ball. Kevin Ball stinks, and they got a lottery protected first round pick in Kevin Ball for a goalie who's flirted with the Vezina like 3 times in the last 7 years. And that's it. I struggle to see a world where it's doable, which means the Rangers are going to have to suck it up and pay whatever the increase is.
Yeah.
If it's 12, if it's 12 and a half, they're going to have to hold their nose, and they're going to have to figure it out on the other end somewhere else on the roster. The Rangers are not abundant in cheap guys. They haven't reached the stage of contender status where guys who are chasing cups are coming here for the minimum. You kind of got that last year with Blake Wheeler and Jonathan Quick, but those are not the same caliber of players as some of the other teams out there, like the Panthers, like the Oilers have gotten for cheap. The Rangers don't have Jeff Skinner for $3 million. They don't have Connor Brown for $1 million. They don't have Matthias Janmark for $1 million. They're paying a lot for a lot of guys. They got a few ELCs, and the restricted free agent clock, if you're looking on YouTube, is on your screen right now. This is your shot here, because Lafreniere's jump, if Lafrenière has, the 70, 80 point season that some people are kind of forecasting, he's undoubtedly asking for triple his money.
Sure.
He only made 2.3 last year, and he got the added benefit of just kind of thumbing his nose at everybody who was talking shit about him for, being a kid.
We talked to Sam Rosen before the season. Yeah. We asked, what is Lafrenière going to do this season? Is there concern? And Sam at the time was very like, oh, well, he's still young. He's going to improve. But if he doesn't, there's a problem. He essentially said that. And then Lafrenière said, I don't care about any of this. I'm going to go score, 60 points or however much it was. Like my man's heard everything and really took it to another level, which was great to see. I mean, like he was by and large a big X factor on this team this season, and he exceeded all expectations.
Agreed. Paying Lafrenière is going to come down to one thing: where the other money is. You think about this in order of priority. Well, we just established the foundational principle of this team is Shesterkin. If Shesterkin's doubling his money, which he's going to, he made 5.6 last year. If you double that, you get 11.2. He's getting at least that. He's getting at least double what he got on his last deal. He's going to get 7 or 8 years. It's going to look gaudy. It is going to be the highest cap hit of any goalie in the league. And you're going to have to suck it up, because if you want the Rangers to be a good hockey team, you need the best player on the team. It's that simple. If you got a solution, by all means, but that's the way we're operating. Then you go down the list. Well, we need Lafrenière because he's a position of need. The Rangers are not abundant in young wingers because Kreider, Panarin, both in their 30s. Kreider, 3 more years. Panarin, 2 more years. You start getting into the where do we go after this permutation of the team.
Right.
And that's why Lafrenière is kind of essential. You can't just go, oh, well, what about Perreault? What about Othman? Okay, that's great. That's 2 guys. You still need 6 other wingers to play with those guys. And you could say all you want, Cooley, Matt Rempe. That's great. Cooley and Matt Rempe are in your top 6. You're playing with the Sharks. You're not a good hockey team if you're playing Will Cooley in your top 6. Not to say Will Cooley can't do it on occasion, but he doesn't profile as a 60, 70 point guy you need if you want to be close to him.
He's a good third line player. He's a great fourth line player.
Yes.
But he's one of those guys where if you need a great fourth line player to play top 6 minutes, you got a problem.
Yes. That's kind of the Rangers conundrum here, because as you get further down the road and the Rangers seem pretty resolute in sticking with at least the expensive pieces on this team for one more season, until you figure out what the next iteration of the team is going to be, what post Zibanejad, Trocheck, Kreider, Panarin is going to be, you got to have Lafrenière in your forecast. He's doubling his money is on a bridge. He's probably tripling his money, and if he plays well, he's getting a long-term extension.
I would think Drury gives him a long-term deal now.
I would not. I don't know, because I would think if they were going to do that, that would be in the wind that was in the Rangers cards, because even if it wasn't like close, it would be out there to kind of get the ball rolling. And that's the benefit of using the hockey media to get your agenda out there is, oh, well, if it's out there, that means there's opportunities here. And then the last thing on Lafrenière before we shift to Miller, he is your one blue chip young guy. You can say Perreault all you want. Until he's in the NHL, I am always going to have an air of skepticism about anybody coming from college, junior, or Europe. I have been okey-doked way too many times to believe, oh, seamless transition, automatic top 6. Perreault very well could be a great player. That is 2 to 3 years away from happening. Brennan Othman, I am not convinced is a top 6 player on a good team. Probably going to get some real run in the NHL this upcoming season, but not something you can bank on going into the near future. And again, we talk about what this team looks like 2-3 years from now. Lafrenière will be 25 at that point. That's when you're at your sweet spot. 25, right. 26, 27. Those are your best years statistically, value-wise. And then statistically, it's usually 29, 30, 31. But at this point, it sounds crazy to say considering where we were 12 months ago, but Lafrenière is an essential building block of the team going into the future. There is no long-term vision of this team without Lafrenière, without Shesterkin, because they need the cost certainty of the cost control. Like even if Draisaitl gets there, McDavid gets there, they still need guys to play with.
It's not happening, by the way.
Andrew, I'm aware, but
I'm not saying it,
could be
I'm not saying it to you. You know that,
yes.
Nick. I'm not saying it to you. I'm saying it to people that are hopeful. The people that are like, oh, but what if I could have a boat, or I could have what's in this box? It could be anything. Could even be a boat. It's like, yeah, I guess, but
it's not happening, guys. I hate to
shatter the hopes and dreams, but that's not happening.
If there's a star player out there, the Rangers will likely try to be involved.
Sure.
If you want to acquire one of those star players, you need to have guys for them to play with. That's kind of the issue. The Rangers will always be involved on good players if they can be. The problem is you need to have a team. The Rangers can go after whoever you want.
Yeah.
They need quality pieces. And a guy like Lafrenière, who has shown incremental improvement each season he's been in the NHL, got his first real run playing with good players, played really well, was third on the team in goals with basically no power play time, led the team. I was second on the team or third on the team in even strength goals, one of the highest rates of 5-on-5 goal scoring in the entire NHL. All of the indicators of an improving player, and he's young, and you have the cost certainty. That's the benefit of getting a guy like him, getting a guy like Miller on that long-term extension off of the first RFA deal. Because you're buying their best years. Even if you give Lafrenière 8 right now, he's going to be 32 by the end of that contract, and he's not done at 32. That's the positive end of that.
It's one of those situations where the Rangers, they have to figure out what their long-term
I don't think they're thinking about that. That's the problem.
But what I'm saying is that is one of, if not the most important objective of these next couple of months, is you have to understand that, okay, this is the team now, and this is what the team is going to have to look like 2 years from now when some of the biggest pieces of the Rangers' future will have new contracts. This is, okay, Lafrenière, let's say he has a great year this season and a great year the season after that. He's gonna get paid big time. Andre Miller, hopefully, if all goes well, he gets better the next 2 seasons as well. And then in 2026, he gets paid as well. Okay, so now you have Shesterkin making big bucks, Laffy making big bucks, and Andre Miller making big bucks. Now, what does the team look like after that? The Rangers have to, I'm sure, listen, this is an NHL organization. I would have to think that at some base level, they are formulating these conversations already and are formulating these blueprints. But that's really one of the most important questions that they have to ask themselves long term. Is, okay, we have some of these young guys. Othman could be something. Perreault could be something. I know they re-signed Matthew Robertson to a 1-year contract. He could be something. Now, will he? I have no idea. But could and will are not the same question, are not the same words here, right? We know Lafrenière, based off of last year, is probably more than likely that's at least how he's going to play for the vast majority of his career. We know Andre Miller, while he does have his faults from time to time, is an up-and-coming young good player in the National Hockey League and is going to be that way for a long time. Shesterkin already has a Vezina, and he might win another 1 or 2 in his career. We know he's one of the best, if not the best goalie in the entire planet. We know these things. These are quantifiable players that we know what their value is moving forward. With prospects, like you said, it's always he could be. Perreault could be very good. I'll
believe it when I see it. That's always my rule.
Could be very good. Right, exactly. By all accounts, obviously, both of us hope that Perreault, Othman, these guys are going to be great NHL players down the line when they get here. But we don't know that until Perreault puts the jersey on, plays 82 games, and he has 50 points. I'm making this up, but we won't know how good these people are until they actually suit up and show us. The projections are all well and good, but let's see it before we pencil anybody in.
It's very hard for somebody to come in to play third line minutes, no power play, and get stats. That's been the issue with Lafrenière till last year, with Hedel, right, with Kakko. Everybody wants the counting stats. If you have really good underlying 5-on-5 numbers and you are in the high 30s or low 40s for your points, and you're getting, 110 of power play a night, like Lafrenière, like Hedel, like Kakko, you're a good hockey player. You're not going to get the counting stats without power play one time. It is that simple. You can be a really, really quality hockey player that records 44, 45 points 55% on the expecteds, 55% on the high dangers. And people will still complain about you because you don't have the counting stats, because they don't understand how much that power play time matters. I said before, the reason people get to their peak counting stats at 28, 29, 30, 31, that's when they're on the first line, they're getting max power play time, and they're on their big deal where the team is going to do everything in their power to give them as much ice time as possible to maximize their value. And then the last player, K'Andre Miller, who we're still in the process. He's got, where is it? 7th most, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's got the 8th most games of anybody in his draft class, the 3rd most of any defenseman. The only defensemen ahead of him are Dobson and Dahlin, who I think we can say safely are better than him at this moment.
Sure.
But as far as Miller's ceiling, you think it's the Jay Bouwmeester archetype. It's big. It's being able to skate. It is a matter of merging those two. Right now, there is still very clearly a mental block about him internally using his size. Okay, well, how do we get around that? How do we maximize that? If he's averse to throwing the big hit, his positioning needs to be elite. He needs to find ways to minimize the need to throw that big hit, to use poke checks or just his body to put himself in a position to force the other team to either slam on the brakes, move the puck, etc. Until he gets better decision making, until he gets that process, where it's secondary nature. Because there are times where I can think of at least 3 or 4 times this year where I was at a Ranger game, someone was skating at him with the puck, and he just didn't move. He kept back skating towards the net, and he didn't cut outside to force the person to the outside. He didn't reach his stick. He didn't throw his arms up. He just kept skating backwards and never took any initiative to try and break the play up. And some of that is the way that pair is structured in trying to play things as safe as possible. But at some level, if those traits are ever going to be what they're supposed to be, he needs to be in a situation to put them to use. And that's really been the big issue here. There are the flashes, but there are plenty of okay hockey players who flash every now and then. Every hockey player is capable of doing something that looks cool every now and then. The difference between a good and an average player is being able to do it a lot. The difference between a good and a great player is the great player can do it all of the time. Right now, I would say K'Andre Miller is trending in the right direction, but at a certain point, the returns are not going to continue to grow as much as they have year over year. And then you're going to get to a point of, well, what can we pay a defenseman who doesn't put up counting stats, who we think is a project, who we think is getting better, but we don't know how much better he can actually get. And this is where you get in trouble. When you start paying defensemen who don't put up stats, who don't have counting stats, you run into a situation where you're the Canucks, where you have Tyler Myers, you have OEL, and you have Quinn Hughes. Well, we can't pay all 3 of these guys, so we've got to get rid of them. So we got to buy one of them out, and then we got to ride out the end of this Tyler Myers contract. And I'm not saying K'Andre Miller's Tyler Myers. I'm saying that the archetype is close enough that, well, we shouldn't go giving him a 6-year deal worth $6.5, $7 million, unless we're sure he can be an elite defensive defenseman, which I'm not convinced he can be.
I think the question that I have, and I don't know the answer to this question, and it's something that I would like somebody that coaches up-and-coming players to give me more insight on, because we know that K'Andre Miller was a forward until late in his, teens, I think it was.
In high school.
He was not a defenseman from day one. So I wonder, because when you play a position from early on, you develop a lot of your IQ in the early stages of your development. When you are, let's say,
IQ is not the right word. Instincts.
Instinct. Sure, let's say instinct. You develop a lot of your instinct early on in your development as a player. My question is, because he became a defenseman late, so his instincts as a defenseman, therefore, are coming in late, is there a point to where K'Andre Miller's defensive instincts will not go past a certain threshold?
Yeah, that's the real question.
And I say that because, listen, I got into chess recently, and I'm watching a Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, one of the greatest, if not one of, if not number 2 best chess player in the world. And he was streaming the other day, and he said, along the lines of, if you start playing chess late, no matter how much time you give to the game, you are never going to be better than a certain point. You just won't. No matter, because you didn't start early, you can make it a full-time job. You can put in 50, 60 hours or more into chess, and you just won't be as good as someone that started earlier than you, giving the same amount of time.
Yep.
And that's my genuine question when it comes to K'Andre Miller is, yeah, he's a defenseman and he's being, he's getting better at it, but is there a cap to his defensive instincts because he started being a defenseman very late, by all accounts, into his development?
That's a very fair question, and it's the undercurrent of every, reductionist person on the internet saying, well, why don't they try him at forward? Well, they've spent 4 years trying to make him a defenseman. So that's why they're not going to try and change him into being a forward, because he's got a unique skill set to be that big and to be able to skate that well. You figure it out. I have always advocated, and I wish the Rangers would do it more, draft for traits. Draft for size, draft for speed. Those are things you can build off of, you can mold, you can shape. I don't care about safe. If you're picking in the draft, get a guy you think can make a real impact. I don't need a third line wing who puts up 33 points a season. I don't. That's not why we pick at 18th in the first round of the draft. Now, those guys eventually have value, but if the Rangers are going to realize their window here, they need to their defense needs to be significantly better.
Your home run pick can't be a third line winger.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not, Miller was at 21st overall, 22nd overall, something like that. They took him with one of the picks. The only redeeming thing from the Ryan McDonough, JT Miller trade is they got K'Andre Miller with the pick.
One of the worst trades in Rangers history. My God.
It's really up there in all consideration. There's some research to be done, but the Rangers need their defense to be significantly better. It's that simple. The Rangers' hold up against Florida was their defense was not good enough. I know people will say they didn't score enough. They didn't score enough because they were playing defense for 35 minutes a game. They were playing defense for 40 minutes a game. If this defense is going to realize its potential, like we've been talking about for the last 10 to 15 minutes, it has to be Miller. I don't think there's a dramatic jump in Lindgren's bag or in Schneider's bag. I really do think Miller is the Rangers' most essential piece as far as realizing the team's potential, because defensemen play so much of the game. Miller plays more at even strength than Adam Fox. Okay, so he plays more than our best defenseman, and we've been doing this for 2 years, and it's based on the idea that we think he's going to get somewhere. At a certain point, he's going to plateau. I'm not saying that's going to be, this upcoming season, but that's got to be in the back of your mind, because that next contract is due at the end of next season. And because the Rangers, I don't want to say they've kicked the can down the road, because they've made very aggressive roster decisions, and it's why they've been so short-term with all of the restricted free agents other than Adam Fox. They've had to keep their money free as possible because they've wanted to do things like Trocheck or adding money in, having money to go in season with, to go get Roslovic, Wenberg, or Kane and Tarasenko, etc. There is no more flexibility. This is it. They're going to go into this season with $3-ish million, depending on what Lindgren gets, if they bring in anybody as a 13th or a 14th forward on a PTO, whatever. $3 to $3.5 million this season. That'll accrue space till the deadline, or if they trade for in-season, whatever, but 3.5. Next season, going into, they will have, at a starting point, $8.5 million of space. You're going to forecast about a $5 million increase, that $3 million. You need extensions for Shesterkin, Miller, and Lafrenière. That's your baseline. That is not handling the entire team. That is not filling every hole. You will have depth chart holes. You will need to give Cooley a contract. You will need to give some other guys contracts. You will need to sign some guys to fill out the bottom half of your roster. There is no more kicking the can down the road. We are a Stanley Cup contender. We're doing everything we can to maintain this. And the Rangers are not in a position like Edmonton where they can just lobotomize parts off and say, we'll figure it out. We have McDavid and Draisaitl. The Rangers, as good as Shesterkin is, as good as Adam Fox are, those two are not as play driving and as foundational to controlling a game as McDavid and Draisaitl are. And because of that, the Rangers need to be more conscious of filling out the rest of their roster. They can't do what Edmonton's doing, where their entire bottom six is like $3 million for Henrique, and then everybody else is like the veteran minimum to $1.5 million. The Rangers are not in a position where they can do that.
Ultimately, as much as Shesterkin would like sometimes to do this, he can't skate out.
He can't score them too.
He can't score, and also he can't skate out, deke four guys, and is also the goalie and score. McDavid can do that. And that's another fundamental difference between the Oilers and the Rangers is, both teams have generational players, but
the Rangers don't have a generational player.
I mean, I think Shesterkin is one. I mean, he's the best goalie on the planet, and therefore...
there have been goalies as good. Vasilevsky is in that boat. Vasilevsky's got more track record, I would say.
But okay, even if you don't, even with that, let's just, for argument's sake, say that, sure. But even then, the Rangers don't have a forward that they can say, okay, well, the fourth line can be, 35-year-olds who are trying their hand into Stanley Cup because we have the best forward on the planet that can just score at will. The Rangers don't have that.
Yes.
So they fundamentally cannot build the same way that Edmonton can.
That's kind of the issue here, man. The Rangers are built very, very similarly to Edmonton, other than the fact they have a good goalie. Yep. But you build it out more than that. Edmonton got that close, and it took 7 games, and it took one of the most miraculous comebacks of all time to get to that position. I really don't know what to make of where the Rangers are going, and that is why this season feels so ominous on the horizon. That because there is so much up in the air, the stakes were already high to begin with, but the clock's ticking on the general manager, the restricted free agents we just talked about. Panarin's 2 years away, Kreider's 3 years away. Zibanejad and Trocheck are there indefinitely, but the clock is ticking, and you probably got one more shot at this.
Yep.
And even then, you're going to go into next season probably the 3rd or 4th best team in the East. You don't have to be the best team in the regular season, but you do need the capability of eventually being the best team. And repeatedly, some of the pieces the Rangers are going to depend on have come up short in those moments, and it is why there is this air of dread, even though, as we've talked about, the roster right now is better than it was on opening night last year.
Yeah.
There is no Nick Bonino. That is a good thing. The Rangers do not have 2 or 3 absolute black holes in their top 12 forwards. The defense is going to be the big issue. If the Rangers' defense is better, the Rangers will have probably a worse win-loss record, but the play will look better, and you will feel better about the team going into the playoffs. That was the question in every single one of their playoff series, except Washington. They could have beat Washington with anyone playing defense, but against Carolina, against Florida, it was, is the defense going to be able to get the puck out quick enough? And against Carolina, they did for a while, and then it got bad really fast. Yeah. Against Florida, it was, we're going to hold on to our butts best we can, and we're going to create goals off the rush, and we're going to hang around by dragging these games out, and Shesterkin's the best goalie in the world. Eventually, someone other than the goalie needs to make a play, and until then, the Rangers are where they are.
Well, that's the thing is, ultimately, and we talked about this before on episodes where the Rangers can win 5 less games in the regular season. That's fine. As long as the play fundamentally is more sound and more repeatable, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because again, the Rangers had a lot of puck luck. They've won a lot of 1-goal games. They've won a lot of close, tight-knit, back and forth kind of affairs that went the Rangers' way. Surely that same luck isn't going to replicate. So by extension, when you have the best record you've ever had in your 98-year, storied franchise, you're bound to not repeat the same level of excellence in the regular season. And that is okay as long as the play is better on the ice. If you lose 3 games because a puck that was shot at from the blue line hits off of 8 legs and goes in the net, and you lose a couple of games because of that, okay. But if you play the rest of the game more fundamentally sound and more this is gonna sound like more playoff ready, I guess, in a way, then that's okay. That's fine. All the Rangers have to do is play better over the course of 82 games. And it sounds silly when I say that because they won 55 games and they were the President's Trophy winners and all that. But a lot of their play was not repeatable. I want to see repeatable hockey being played at a high level such that when you get to the playoffs, it is you teams have to worry about, even at 5-on-5, except it's not the other way around, like the Rangers played against teams like Florida, where a lot of it was, all right, just everybody hold on, we're going to do our best, and then we're going to, the puck's over there, or we got to, like, as soon as the Rangers stop doing that, and they get other teams coming into the playoff series with that kind of attitude against the Rangers, that's when we'll see that barrier being broken. Until that point happens, we might be talking about the same exact thing a year from now.
And unfortunately, because of the way sports are, that's probably what's going to happen, because it's really hard to win the Stanley Cup, even if you are a really good team, unfortunately. So that'll do it for this week's edition of the Liberty Blue Pod. Hopefully 45 minutes of salary cap discourse hasn't melted you to sleep yet, but if you could be so kind, please, 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 especially now that we can't stream on Twitter because we're not giving the bad man money, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, take an extra second. Please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, get a notification whenever new content goes out. Hit 600 subscribers today, up 200 something since the start of the playoffs.
Thank you.
Got you guys covered.